Welcome everyone to this month's Ward 1 community meeting. My name is Bernie Schultz. I'm the Ward 1 counselor. And tonight we have guests, Council President Anthony Zarilla and DPW Commissioner Nick Erickson. So we're probably going to talk a lot about bridge repair, road paving, water main replacement. And so we're going to get started with DPW Commissioner Nick. He's got a presentation for us. So, Nick, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Councilor. So I prepared a short presentation specific to the bridges that we have in the city of Fitchburg. So I'll go over those briefly, then we can talk about some of the other good stuff that's going on at DPW. So again, my name is Nicholas Erickson, Commissioner of Public Works with the city of Fitchburg. Thanks to Councilor Schultz for having me attend the Ward 1 meeting tonight. And like I said, this is a presentation about the Fitchburg bridges. So within the city of Fitchburg, we have 65 total bridges, 30 of which are owned by Mass DOT, 33 are owned by the city, then there's 2 privately owned pedestrian bridges. One being the pedestrian bridge that connects 2 of the Fitchburg State buildings on North Street, and then the other being a small bridge right at Riverfront Park that connects the park to Boulder Drive. So up on the screen here, you see a little map. It's tough to really hone in on where the bridges are, but the large 24 by 36 version of this map shows clearly where the city's bridges are and differentiates between DOT and city-owned bridges.
One is drive and one is walkway.
Right, so the drive one is owned by the city. The pedestrian bridge is private, and that's, I think, legacy bridge from when there was some industry down in that area.
There's another bridge that's going to Flicker Drive. It's a new area of houses up on, I don't know, I forget the name of the, but you have to go, I have to turn into a street and it goes, has a dip, and then you come out of but they were doing construction there. Are they done with that?
I'm not exactly sure where you mean.
It's called, I go and visit someone at Ficker Drive, so that's the street I go to.
Okay.
But I have to go through that bridge.
That Ashburnham Hill Road?
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about, Westminster Hill Road. So we'll get to that later on in the presentation. I've got a slide dedicated just to that. You're talking about the one that's narrowed down to 1 lane right now? Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a
Let's
few
let
minutes.
Nick make his presentation, then he'll answer all your questions.
Thanks. So I wanted to start by going over a few of the Mass DOT bridge projects that are upcoming over the next few years. So DOT works very well with the city in helping us replace bridges that are in deteriorating condition. Some of these bridges are owned by Mass DOT themselves, others are owned by the city, and they provide assistance to us, and that's much appreciated. So there's one bridge that was completed in 2020, that's Westminster Street over Phillips Brook. So you see that in the area, let's see if I can, oh, it doesn't show my cursor. But Westminster Street over Phillips Brook is in the western section of the city. So upcoming over the next several years, we have the Circle Street Bridge replacement, the River Street Bridge replacement, and 2 Water Street Bridge replacements. So Circle Street is, if you're looking from left to right, it's the second one in on the right, over by Crocker Field. You can see the circle right around where the bridge is. And that'll be done this coming construction season. So beginning, actually the contractor is mobilized right now. So they'll be beginning most of the work this summer and completed most of it by the end of the summer. The second project that they're going to be working on is the River Street Bridge Replacement Project. So that'll start next year in 2024. And that's the one on the top left of your screen that's circled just north of Crocker Field there. And then between 2025 and 2026, DOT anticipates replacing both of the Water Street bridges, and those are the 2 that are circled in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. One is a bridge over Boulder Drive and the railroad tracks, and one is a bridge over the Nashua River. Both of those are right in the area of Market Basket, if you're familiar. So over the next 5 years, you know, there are major traffic implications of these three projects. So DOT is working on finalizing their traffic control plans, and we should have a better idea relatively soon how that's going to impact the city. Circle Street Bridge itself right now is closed to traffic. It's been closed for several years just because of the condition of the bridge. That's a one-way street off of Main Street that effectively serves some of the bridges on, or some of the businesses rather, on Broad Street and the DPW. So it's not a heavily traveled road, but important nonetheless due to its proximity to Crocker Field right there and heavy use by high school kids for sporting events at the field. So this is a photo looking down Circle Street. You can see the Crocker Field clubhouse to the right of the bridge. As you can see, it's open in this picture. This was from 2019. We closed the bridge due to some concerns about the deck condition in late 2020. Each of these barrels is on a hole in the bridge deck that goes straight down through to the river below. So it's in really poor condition. It's been shut down to vehicular traffic because of that for the past several years. And like I said, DOT is anticipating completing this bridge reconstruction within the next year or so. Right now it's even close to pedestrian just because it's in such bad condition. And now the contractor is mobilized, so they've got construction fencing up and heavy machinery in and around there. So it'll be off limits for the foreseeable future. If everything goes according to DOT's schedule, it should be open sometime this fall. We'll see if that happens. So this is the project that DOT has lined up for next year, the River Street Bridge replacement. So this is in between essentially Dunkin' Donuts and the former Casey's Pub. There's a roundabout right there, right at Main and River Street. That's kind of in the background of the image there. So this bridge replacement is relatively straightforward, but it does carry a high volume of traffic, so the temporary traffic control plan here is going to have a major impact on how people get from east to west or west to east through the city. So right now, DOT is talking about routing traffic up Main Street and then down West Street and over to Wallace Road or down Sheldon Road to get around this project. So we're working closely with DOT, fire and police departments to make sure that it's done in a way that makes it easiest for their emergency vehicles to get around the city. Yep, you could do that too. And so with this project, they're planning to keep one lane of traffic open at any given time. So they'll do half the bridge first, then they'll shift and do the other half of the bridge. And then in 2025, 2026, DOT plans to complete the replacement of the two Water Street bridges. So on the left here, you see an image of the Water Street Bridge over Boulder Drive, and on the right, you see the image of the bridge over the Nashua River. Both are in relatively poor condition. The bridge over Boulder Drive has traffic delineators to keep traffic off of the most deteriorated beams in the bridge. So you notice those next time you drive over the bridge. And it makes for a tight and relatively congested area. This also receives a great deal of traffic. So it's going to have major impacts to getting through the city when it goes to construction. And this will be done in a similar fashion to River Street, where they'll work on half the bridge at a time.
Listening to it, you walk under.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Well,
Plus all the sound bounces off the buildings down there, so it really magnifies the noises. And on the right, you see the bridge over the Nashua River. That bridge has been repaired by DPW and by the state on several occasions. There's a hole right at the bridge abutment that keeps opening up and occasionally needs to be filled in with concrete and rebar. So it'll be good to get both of these bridges replaced. They've both exceeded their design lifespan. They're both in relatively poor condition. They're eyesores. And we're really hoping that once these are completed, it'll bring new life to the areas on either side of them. And one other important thing to note with the Water Street Bridges project is that DOT is allowing the city to include some of the water and sewer infrastructure work in and around these bridges in their project as a non-participating cost. And what that means is that the city is responsible for putting together the engineering design and furnishing bid documents to DOT, and DOT will include those big documents in their overall project so they can bid it out to a single contractor that'll perform the bridge work plus the city's utility work. So there's some water main issues in and around this area. There's some sewer issues in and around this area. And there's some drain issues in and around this area. So it'll be nice to address everything all at once while it's all ripped apart, instead of having to go back, several years later.
Work up to it.
Right. Yeah, so we did do a lot of sewer and drain work on Boulder Drive as part of the Main Street Boulder Drive two-way conversion project. And that was in advance of DOT getting in there and doing their stuff to make sure that there's no flooding underneath the bridge.
The Water Street one over there is where they were doing a lot of Route 12 area and Walnut Street, and Nashville Street.
Yeah. Yeah, it was part of the combined sewer separation project that the wastewater division had going on, in addition to that main Boulder two-way conversion project.
Will it impede access to Market Basket?
It's going to make it difficult to cross. Like I said, they'll do half the bridge at a time. So there'll be a detour set up to get around and over the river, or over the railroad tracks rather, and the river, so that you can get over to Market Basket. So the Putnam Street Bridge, that'll be heavily used in the meantime. Citrina Memorial Bridge be another bypass. So those are kind of the bridges immediately upstream and downstream of the project area. So it'll be tough for the next several years, kind of getting anywhere in the city due to these three bridge projects. But once it's all done, it should be much easier to get around. DOT is also planning some intersection reconfiguration for the intersection of Main Street at Water Street. So it'll hopefully alleviate some of the congestion there too. I believe they're going to be adding a third lane on the Water Street approach to Main Street to allow for left traffic with 2 lanes and then a dedicated right-hand turn lane. And obviously that's subject to change as DOT kind of refines their design, but that's the latest that I've heard from them. Day Street, yeah, so there'll still be a lane where you can either take the left or go straight across through Day Street. So it'll be kind of...
For those of us walking, they'll actually have walking there, because if you go from coming over from Market Basket on that side, there's no light for walking.
Right, right. And
There and on the other side from Main Street, over there by Tacos Tequila.
yeah, and the goal there is to also add in better pedestrian facilities there. So I believe they're proposing an 8-foot wide shared use path on the Market Basket side of the bridge. So it'll allow better pedestrian access from Market Basket over to the Main Street area and vice versa.
Will all of the bridge projects include pedestrian, like expanded pedestrian access?
Only the bridge over Boulder Drive. The bridge over the Nashua River, the width is kind of at the limits of what it can support right now. So the sidewalks and travel lanes will remain approximately the same. But the Water Street Bridge over Boulder Drive, closer to Main Street, will have improved pedestrian access.
And what about a cycle lane in any of them?
I believe the pedestrian facility over Boulder Drive is a shared use path, so it'll be bike ped accommodations in a single shared use pathway. On the bridge over the Nashua River, that will not have dedicated bike lanes. It'll just be travel lanes, shoulder, and then the pedestrian sidewalks. And the reason being is just the volume of traffic and the actual width that we have available. So DOT is not planning to do any work to the abutments, only to the superstructure. So they can't really make it any wider than it is now. They have to maintain certain widths for travel lanes and shoulders, so that only leaves a certain amount of room for the sidewalks.
And my other question, will stormwater retention be incorporated into these projects?
So there'll be some stormwater work, especially around the Water Street Bridge over Boulder Drive, to better control stormwater and get it into the city's drainage system. There won't be any green infrastructure proposed as far as I'm aware, just because of the limited footprint available for these bridge replacement projects. If there was a lot of green space open next to the bridges, I'm sure DOT could make something a little bit more workable. But right now, on the bridge over Boulder Drive, we're kind of limited with Enterprise Rent-A-Car in one corner, a huge building on the opposite corner, the police memorial right across the bridge on the other side. And those are kind of the four corners of the bridge there. And then likewise over the Nashua River, you've got shopping plazas on one end, and then a roadway area on the other end. So there's no real area for infiltration or green infrastructure.
Nick, do you mind answering questions as we go on, or would you rather?
No,
have
not
them
at all.
Okay, and we'll go with that format then.
Sorry, I apologize. What's the duration of the time for this?
So this is anticipated to be 25 to 26, 2025 to 2026. But that's the latest I've heard from Mass DOT, starting in 2025, continuing through 2026. Yeah.
Yeah, you missed that slide, Bruce. He's got Circle Street maybe this fall being done, and River Street's going to start in 2024, the River Street Bridge.
Yeah. Yeah, River Street will be bid out later this year. Construction likely won't start till 2024, though. So you might see some activity late this year, after October, but they probably won't start the full construction until next season.
And the question that's always asked, Nick, is that roundabout going to go when the construction starts?
Well, so prior to the roundabout, we had a major issue with speeding right through that intersection there. It was kind of a raceway from Main Street onto River Street. It was impossible for vehicles to pull out of Main Street coming from that little spur from Greektown. So effectively, as much as a pain in the butt as it is, the roundabout does exactly what it's supposed to do. It slows people down going through that intersection. We've seen accidents drop off. We've seen pedestrian accidents drop off. So it's functioning as intended, even though it's a pain in the butt to drive over. So DOT's bridge project is a little bit removed from that area. It's a little further down. But we also will be doing a combined sewer separation project in that area beginning this year, which will actually heavily impact the roundabout and all the traffic islands that are kind of built into it to guide the lanes into and out of the roundabout. So right now we're trying to figure out exactly what we're going to put back there. Unfortunately, I don't think the roundabout's going to go away. It might look a little bit different than it does now. Because it functions so well at slowing the traffic down, I think we kind of owe it to the original design to put it back.
It has a good purpose, and I'm not picking an argument or pissing contest here, but if you could just make it a little bit smaller, only because of the idea that when you're coming from Main Street, going towards West Street, you've got to make that corner. And I've watched the fire trucks do it, the ambulance do it, the police do it. We all have to run over it. I understand it's a good idea if the rotaries work. I love them. But I'm just saying that one is so big, that's significant, that when you go to make that corner to go from Main Street onto River Street, that corner, it's a real tiger. So.
It's tight. What I'd like to do is...
If they got some of the land, empty land there beside it, it could be repositioned a bit better. And they did change Chestnut Street to be one way.
Right. So the city actually owns a small sliver of land out in front of the business there. It's called Keys by MLK. That's the new business that went in there. So if you take Chestnut Street and just kind of extend it out, the city owns that little area too. So I'd like to see that curb line kind of right where you're talking about, making that transition from Main onto River. Take that curb line, push it back a couple of feet, just to give you some more room to swing around the circle.
That would make a big difference.
Coming from River to Main, there's an empty lot there.
Right. The city doesn't own that lot, and that's another point of contention with the property owner in the city. There's some issue there. So I don't anticipate the city being able to take any land there unless we do so by eminent domain. And I'm not sure we really want to go through that process just for a combined sewer separation project, which comes out of the Wastewater Enterprise Fund. And I don't think it's fair to acquire property for a traffic issue and then stick that cost with the sewer ratepayers. That's kind of like stealing Peter to pay Paul, I guess. We need to make sure that we maintain that distinction between enterprise fund dollars and street work, because they're two separate buckets of money that can't really commingle. So when we restore the work impacted by the combined sewer separation work, we're kind of limited to just restoring what was there without doing any major surgery to the road and changing configurations and all that. Shifting a curb line back a little bit and making that roundabout function a little better, I think is doable with that sewer enterprise fund money. But acquiring property and doing major redesign of that intersection, I think, is a little bit outside of our abilities with that. So just some explanation as to, the thought that goes behind some of these decisions.
Was it designed so the trucks could go over the edges of it?
It is. The whole center island of that roundabout is designed to be mountable. So if you've got a tractor-trailer truck, it's really a speed bump at that point, and they just continue on and drive right over the center of it. Same with the one over at Rollstone and Electric Ave. It's meant to be mountable so that a school bus or an 18-wheeler can just drive right over it if they need to. And you'll see the roundabout at John Fitch Highway, at Ringe Road, at Mechanic Street. There's a center island that's raised and it's got grass and plantings, but then there's also a little apron. And that apron is also designed to be mountable so that a truck that can't quite make the radius can let its back wheels up, ride up over the curb there. So before I move on, any more questions on the Water Street Bridge project?
We appreciate the work that's going to be done in Ward 1 with those Water Street bridges. They've needed work for a long, long time.
Yeah, I think those temporary barriers that DOT put out there for us have been out for at least 4 or 5 years at this
Already,
point.
yeah.
It's in dire need of some TLC. So that's one of the things that we work very closely with Mass DOT on are these projects. Because when they go in and do work, they don't necessarily have a good understanding of our traffic patterns, our utilities, and all that. So we need to work with them to make sure that any of the needs that we have within their footprint get addressed. So a good example of that is the Main Boulder two-way conversion project. So you'll notice in most areas we did concrete sidewalks with granite curb, but right around that DOT bridge project beneath the bridge on Boulder Drive, we did concrete and granite up to a point, and then same deal on the other side, concrete and granite up to a point, and then we stopped and transitioned to asphalt berm and asphalt sidewalk. And the reason being is that we know DOT is going to come in, do their bridge project, rip all that stuff out, and put back what we actually need is the concrete and granite and all that stuff. So this project, we've been working on and coordinating with DOT for years. So we purposefully left out that kind of area that they're going to be touching and used less costly materials to construct what we needed to construct and shift the lanes and everything, with the understanding that DOT is going to come rip it all out and put back the final surface treatments that we need. All right. So we've also got a number of city bridge projects and project needs that I've tried to summarize here in this image. So got a bunch of red circles. So moving, I guess, left to right. So in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen is Arbor Way, and that's up in the Montechusett Industrial Park. Then moving right, we've got the Westminster Hill Road Bridge. So that's the one that you mentioned earlier. And then moving right from there, you've got the Oak Hill Road Bridge. Then moving right and north from there, you've got the Fisher Road Bridge. And then moving right and south from there, you've got the Crawford Street Bridge. And Crawford Street gets confused oftentimes with Airport Road. It's Airport Road from Bemis Road to this bridge, and then Crawford Street from this bridge to the town line. So these are all in varying levels of need. So right now the city has funding to address the Westminster Hill Road Bridge and the Arbor Way Bridge, and we're working with DOT to help fund the Oak Hill Road Bridge replacement. So the Westminster Hill Road Bridge in particular, that's the one it's narrowed down to one lane right now to keep traffic off of the most heavily deteriorated portion of the bridge. But we went out to Mass DOT's Small Bridge Grant Program and received funding to complete that replacement. So we're in the process of design and permitting right now to get that bridge fixed. We should be done with that relatively soon. So we anticipate going out to bid with that sometime late spring or early summer, with the intention of hopefully completing construction before the end of this year. So that bridge is a stone arch masonry bridge. And basically the repair method is going to be installing a steel liner underneath the bridge in kind of like an arch shape. And then
Still be able to drive over it?
Yep, you'll still be able to drive over it. While fixing it. So we'll install they call it a tunnel liner. So it's a steel arch, and then it gets pinned to the footings of the bridge with concrete. So that's hopefully going to be taken care of this year. Likewise with Arbor Way, we have funding from the mayor's office to take care of that. That's a little culvert with 2 retaining walls on both sides of the roadway. The retaining walls have started to fail, so we've got money from the mayor's office to complete the design and move forward with the bidding and construction work to get that fixed.
Can be go around going up Sanborn Street.
Right.
It's not the best intersection to get out of, but
Right. There's
There
some
is.
good detours around there.
Yeah.
So this is the Westminster Hill Road Bridge looking towards Ashburnham Street. So you can see on the left the barrels and Jersey barriers keeping traffic on the most heavily deteriorated upstream half of the bridge. So like I said, the repair method for this will be to install a tunnel liner system underneath the bridge, and then eventually we'll take care of the top piece of it too after the The goal for this one is to bid it out late spring, early summer, and have construction complete by the end of this calendar year. So like I said, we received a grant from Mass DOT to take care of this work. The grant expires on December 31st of this year. So we either need to finish the work or get an extension from Mass DOT. So that's where we're at right now with this one. Right. So as Hal mentioned, there's a few detour options for this one. But you can still use it while it's being fixed. So there's 3 images on the screen. I probably should have put borders in between the 3 images so it's a little more clear which is which. But in the top left, this is an image looking kind of down Arbor Way. So Arbor Way is a dead-end road in the Montechusett Industrial Park that serves 2 businesses. So this is the only way for these businesses to access their property. So it's imperative that this remains open during construction. The only other way to get around that would be to build another road coming in through private property, which is, it would cross wetlands, it would cross a stream, and it's a permitting and logistic nightmare. So what you see here on each side of the roadway are retaining walls. So the other 2 images that you see, bottom left and to the right, are shots of those retaining walls. And you can see, especially in the image on the right, towards the top of the wall, how you see those top 10 layers or so of blocks starting to fail. And that's extremely concerning. It's probably only a matter of years before the rest of this wall starts to collapse, then the road becomes unusable. So it's imperative that we fix this. We've got money from the mayor's office to do so, and like I said, we're working through the design and permitting right now. And this project will follow the same timeline as Westminster Hill Road, hopefully, which is bidding out late spring, early summer, and construction late this calendar year. So this road was built in the late 90s as part of the industrial park expansion. And unfortunately, we don't have good records on how the wall was built, and that's why we've been relatively unable to diagnose why the wall has failed. The method of construction here, it's a block retaining wall. So each layer of blocks is tied back into the slope with these tie-back devices. And if those tiebacks aren't installed at every layer, then the wall is prone to failure. So what we're thinking might have happened is that the tiebacks weren't installed correctly, and over time the wall settled and started to fail. And this has been exacerbated by road runoff because the road wasn't properly graded during construction. So I think there were multiple failures during the construction of this road, and unfortunately we're paying the price here 20-something years later.
heavy use than was anticipated.
That's another good point, Hal. So one of the businesses down here is Harvey Recycling. And there's significant truck traffic all day, every day during the week. And it's not light truck traffic. It's, 18-wheelers and dumpster vehicles and whatnot. So there's a lot of heavy trucks that come in and out of this facility every day. And I'm sure that just further exacerbated the problem. So this is the other bridge that I mentioned, the Oak Hill Road Bridge. This is similar to Westminster Hill Road Bridge, where we've got Jersey barriers keeping traffic off of the most heavily or structurally deficient steel members underneath the bridge. We've done minor repairs to this bridge over the years just to make sure that it stayed open. Back a number of years ago, right when I started working for the city, I think it was 2016, 2017 timeframe, there was a significant chance that this bridge was going to be shut down by Mass DOT. And the commissioner at the time, his name was Lenny Laxo, he worked with DOT to complete some temporary repairs and install these barriers to keep traffic off the most heavily damaged members, just in an effort to keep the bridge open. So as you know, the Oak Hill Road Fire Station is not too far from here. So it's critical that this bridge remains open for emergency vehicles to access the western half of the city. And likewise, all the traffic from the neighborhoods to the north of River Street, accessing the rest of the city via this bridge. So according to Mass DOT, the replacement of this bridge has been placed on a contingency list for funding. And essentially what that means is DOT is committing to funding the repair of this bridge pending sliding it in somewhere over the next few years, given their available budget. So I think there's some more advocacy work for me and the mayor and other people in the city to do to make sure that DOT follows through with what they've initially promised us here. But that's huge news because this is probably like an $8 to $10 million bridge replacement that the state's considering funding for us, which is huge because there's not $8 to $10 million just available in the budget for us to use. This would be a really difficult project to fund without DOT's assistance. And as I mentioned, it's a critical piece of infrastructure, so we need to make sure that it stays open. So this is an engineering drawing showing the bridge. So right in the middle of the page, you can see some of the members that I guess they're on the plan view. The structural members at the top are the ones that are most heavily damaged. And that's where the Jersey barriers are placed to keep traffic away from, so that the bridge can remain open. So if we hadn't placed those Jersey barriers to keep the load off of those steel members, DOT was going to force us to close that bridge. So I know they're unsightly, and it's not a good thing to look at every day for the traffic that comes down Oak Hill Road. But without those Jersey barriers keeping the load off of those structurally deficient members, we'd have to close the bridge. So this is an image of the Fisher Road Bridge, which I mentioned. So this is a little side street that comes down from the hills of Fitchburg and meets up with the roundabout at John Fitch, Mechanic Street, Ringe Road, and Ashby State Road. So it's definitely a lower volume bridge than some of the other ones that we've discussed here. But there's some safety concerns specifically with the height of the walls adjacent to the bridge, and not shown in this picture, but on the far edge of the bridge, kind of in the background, there's supposed to be guardrails coming off of the stone walls that border the bridge. So we really need to install some guardrails there and do our best to raise up the level of those walls on either side, just to prevent pedestrians, kids from walking on top of it, falling off, etc. So these are relatively lower cost repairs, compared to a whole bridge replacement that we're hoping to undertake within the next calendar year.
Very old and archaic.
It is. So the DPW's done some work on this bridge over the past 5 years or so. So all of the granite walls that you see here were rebuilt by the DPW at one point. So our plan is to take old granite chunks, old sections of curbing and whatnot that we have laying around at the yard, try to figure out which ones we might be able to reuse and build these walls up a little bit higher, and then maybe install some fencing along the top. Still kind of working out the engineering design for the repairs here.
Good troll fishing on that bridge too.
Oh, yeah? Hopefully we don't make it too difficult for you to get down underneath.
That's where I go, right over there.
So kind of out of the screenshot, but just to the left of this image is a little parking area, like 1 or 2 cars. There was a petition that was approved through City Council roughly a year ago at this point, to install some lighting there as a safety issue. We've had a lot of dumping issues, and we're in the process of getting that lighting installed with our lighting contractor. We're hoping that mitigates the dumping issues somewhat. And finally, we have the Crawford Street Bridge. Now, this is a bridge right at the end of Airport Road where it transitions to Crawford Street. The DPW owns a sandpit site just to the right of this image is the entrance. And that sandpit site is going away. It's actually owned by the Redevelopment Authority, and it's in the process of being sold off for a warehouse development right now. But this bridge is in rough shape. There's occasionally holes in the concrete decking that open up, and we got to go in and patch it. And the road, basically from here all the way down to Bemis Road, is in really rough shape. The only thing stopping us right now from repaving it is the water main situation underneath there. The water main needs to be replaced badly, so I'm working with the Water Division on coming up with a timeline for replacement of the water main so that we can actually go in and pave the road. We paved from here down to the Leominster Town line a couple of years ago. That was also a very rough section of road, but it's much improved since we paved it a couple of years ago. So we'd like to finish this last little section that's outstanding, but like I said, we're waiting on the water main replacement to be done here first. So with that, I'll open it up to any additional questions. That concludes my little segment on the city's bridges. Yes?
So we passed question 1 in the state, and the money's supposed to go for roads, K through 12 schools, and higher education. And I have been contacting Cronin and Kushnerek frequently, and they never respond to me. I'm looking for a commitment from them and hoping maybe you guys can get a commitment from them to put the money towards our roads. I'm very concerned they're going to do something like try to dump it all into higher ed Fitchburg State Theater project, which they seem to love. I mean, Fitchburg State, we've got the head of the state university system, Marty Meehan, earning $682,000 a year. And then we've got Fitchburg with a 15% poverty rate. We're the ones who need the money. We need it for our roads. It shouldn't be going to higher ed. They don't respond to me. Can you guys get through to them?
Yes, I will do my best. I agree that a significant chunk of that money should be given to cities and towns to address their roads. And I think the best way to do that is through the Chapter 90 program. Otherwise, I'm scared to see what the state does to dish out that funding through grant programs. Grant programs are great, but administratively they're incredibly burdensome between the application process, managing the grants, and usually there's strings attached, tying some sort of a development or housing development, urban development, commercial development to the different road projects they fund through the grant programs. So I think Chapter 90 is one of the most equitable ways to do it, and I'd love to see our Chapter 90 budget go from 1.2 million to whatever we can get.
You might not know or not, the water main going down Boulder Drive, I believe they got ARPA money to do that. I don't know if you've heard anything about how that is progressing or not.
Yes, so the engineering design is complete, or nearly complete. They're finalizing the bid documents right now. The plan is to go out to bid within the next 2 months, I'd say. The only kind of question mark is the availability of ductile iron pipe right now. So assuming it goes out to bid within the next 2 months, award it to a contractor. We're not sure how long it's going to take for the contractor to order and furnish that ductile iron pipe. So we're hoping it gets constructed this season or this calendar year. But if that piping has a backlog or a back order, then we might be forced to push that project out to accommodate.
I know that is instrumental to them replacing some of the mains on Main Street that are older than all of us together.
Yeah, it's going to take those side streets as well.
Right,
Boulder Drive.
Boulder Drive and the side streets.
Stratton Players has the building over next to the Fay Club.
Right.
And rather than try to go across everything else to get water to it, which then would be torn up again. If we can tie into that while it's all being done, is the time to do it.
Absolutely, yeah. So through the first round of ARPA funding, that particular project received $3.75 million worth of the ARPA funds. With that $3.75 million, we funded the design and permitting of that project, which obviously didn't cost $3.7 million just for that. So there's a little bit left over, well, quite a bit actually, left over from that initial round of funding. And the mayor has agreed to fund the gap between what's remaining and what we estimate the total construction cost to be. So that includes the water main plus full depth paving reconstruction from Main Street to Main Street, essentially. We've got to accommodate 2 projects within that stretch, though. So there could be a couple sections that we probably don't pave right away. One being the intersection with Putnam Street, because there's some combined sewer separation work that has to happen there, and another being where the Mass DOT bridge project will overlap with Boulder Drive. Because the last thing we want to do is repave a section of road and then have DOT come in and rip it up and all that. Even if they're repaving it for us, it's still a waste of everyone's money and time and effort and all that. So I'm anticipating that the water main project, if there's no delay with furnishing and the ductile iron pipe, it could be completed this construction season. My guess is that we will see some delays with ductile iron pipe, and it'll probably span this year and a portion of early next year. That would be my guess, but we won't know until we actually bid it out and get a contractor on board.
Loyola's, we'd love to get, they put in the new sidewalks there, but there's a pretty big section between where the road is and the sidewalk comes down. It's hard for people to get in.
Yeah, there's like a 2-inch lip there,
Yeah.
and that was a combination of the work settling and a relatively poor install by the contractor. Yeah. And when we come in and do the water main, typically when you do a water main, you do a permanent trench patch, and that only encompasses, the trench that was dug plus a foot on either side. But what we've done is we've asked the mayor for additional money above and beyond just a trench patch to make sure that we can do full depth reconstruction for the whole road. So we're probably going to find some crazy stuff under the ground there when we dig, between railroad tracks, trolley tracks, old foundations, cobblestones. There used to be a lot of industrial activity in that area, so we're probably going to find a lot of the remains as we go along. So we've included a heavy contingency for all those unknowns underneath the surface.
The house I was at up in Westminster, where I had my garage, had a cobblestone driveway. He had friends, the DPW, that when they were doing stuff, number one, they didn't want to have to carry the cobblestones away or put them back. To have someone make them disappear, they were happy.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Mayor had a question?
I just wanted to, well, I know there's a lot of activity in redoing and repaving or fixing all these bridges. All that is that federal money that's coming in? Because we know that the President Biden was talking about bridges and roads and all this money that he was sending.
Yeah, so that's in effect how all of these bridge projects through Mass DOT are getting funded. So Circle Street, River Street, the 2 Water Street bridges, and then ultimately Oak Hill Road. If that money didn't exist, I don't think you'd see DOT funding any of those projects. So each of those bridge projects are massively expensive projects. So a huge portion of that money is going towards the state's bridges, and they're luckily targeting quite a few in Fitchburg.
Jacqueline?
Yeah, so I had an idea, this is really maybe more for Councilor Zarella, because I imagine it will be some sort of ordinance. My idea is we can't keep up with paving the roads that we have now. Yeah, we're getting all this help with the bridges, but the paving is still not being done. So why don't we put a moratorium on any new public roads in the city? You want to develop your property, you're still free to do it, but you've got to handle the road yourself. That would encourage people to renovate existing buildings to keep our density high, to preserve more open space. It would be better for the environment, and we wouldn't keep adding roads when we can't even keep up with what we have now.
So that's certainly something to consider. I don't think it would require an actual ordinance saying no more road acceptances. I think it's just every road acceptance comes through city council anyway. So that's certainly something we could consider. On the other hand, we don't want to discourage people from bringing development money into the city, but it's a balance that I think we can look at. It's not one that I want to make any commitment on off the cuff without having discussed with my colleagues and with City Hall and so forth, but it's something to think about, yeah.
I know they had some problem getting the constructed roads to be up to requirements.
Right.
Instead of putting something in that won't last and becomes a great expense.
Right, that's something we dealt with actually, and I think my first year on the council, it was, I forget the name of the street now, it's the little dead-end street off of South Street that has one house on either side and two in the back. They wanted to have it accepted as a city street, and frankly, they were all good, enthusiastic, tax-paying citizens. We wanted to help them out, but the street was so far below standard that we just couldn't, by regulations, accept it as a public street until it had been brought up at least somewhere near spec. And so it still isn't, as far as I know. And speaking for myself and my colleagues on the city property committee at the time, we felt really bad about having to deny the petition. But it's like you said, whoever had been responsible for installing or maintaining that road just didn't do it right. And the current residents are now paying the price for that, which frankly sucks.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we've got a number of cases in the city of private roads, paper roads, where they were put in back in the day, and for one reason or another, they were never formally accepted by the city. And either they've fallen into a state of disrepair. There's not a whole lot the city can do because we can't expend public funds to fix private roadways or conduct permanent drainage repairs or a number of other things there. All we're really limited to being able to do is plow the snow, salt and sand, and patch potholes and remove trash. That's what we can do on those private or paper roads. And so back to Jacqueline's issue, we also have a handful of streets that were constructed within the last 10 to 12 years, but never formally accepted by the city or city council, even though they were built to the city specs. So they had bounds installed for, demarcating the edge of the right-of-way and all that stuff. And for one reason or another, I don't know if it was the legal department or planning or DPW, where the fault was, but they were never accepted as public ways at the time when they should have been accepted. So I've got a list now that I'm working with the law department on trying to figure out like a checklist and streamline the process for getting those streets accepted so that they're not languishing. So you might see some of those before City Council, and I'd encourage you to attend and give input on anything that you feel necessary too.
Right, and I would agree, those are a separate case, because if there was any fault in the city not accepting them, then whoever's living there now shouldn't be the ones to pay the price for that, even if it means that we're going to be taking on more roads to maintain. But going forward, yeah, it's something we could think about. If someone comes to us and says, hey, I want to put in a big new development with a half-mile of roadway, are we going to accept it as a city street? I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a concern because, like you said, I don't think there's anyone here who would disagree that we don't have the resources right now to keep up with the roads that we have, despite how good a job the DPW does with what they have. I don't think anyone can expect you guys to get blood from a stone or spin gold out of straw. So,
I wish I could.
yeah, oh, me too. Better yet, spin asphalt out of straw. You'll make more money that way.
With the asphalt prices nowadays, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's definitely a good thing to think about going forward. And I'll discuss it with my colleagues the next time it comes up. We'll see.
So that's a good segue into talking about roads, Anthony. I guess, unless you have more questions for Commissioner Erickson, for Nick.
It's kind of a two-part question. What's the criteria for determining what roads in Fitchburg get fixed per year? Like this year here, I believe I heard back in November that you've got Indigo Road picked, Circle Street, and there was another one.
Concord Street.
Okay. How does that process work? Is that determined by the condition of the road, or is that something people do like in the road? I would imagine the reason that was picked was because of Amazon supposedly going into that warehouse, so you want to give them a better access to that. But how does that process work? Is that something that you sit down as a council, or do you determine that in the Department of Public Works? What's your...
So there's quite a few criteria that we use to kind of judge what's a candidate for road paving in any given year. Conditions, the most important factor for picking out a list of roads that need to be paved. But then we need to look at what the condition of the underground utilities is. So has water been done? Has sewer been done? Is there combined sewer separation work that needs to be done? Has gas already gone in there? So is Unitil, got any work on the horizon? So that's kind of the first two things we look at: condition of the road and condition of the utilities. If everything passes, so the road's in bad shape and the utilities are all done, and there's no other need there that's identified, then it gets placed on kind of a short list. And then on that short list, we go through and evaluate where we have funding allocated for certain roads. So in the past, what would happen is, say Unitil went in and dug up a road. They would contribute a certain number of dollars to the city's paving program specifically for that road. So there's a lot of roads that Unitil's gone in there and done work for, but we're still waiting on water, or we're still waiting on sewer, or both, that there's money there for, but we really shouldn't spend it until water and sewer are both done as well, so that we can go in there, all the utilities are done, then we can take that funding and it'll reduce the impact to the city's bottom line. And so that donation process is the same for Unitil, for water, and for wastewater. So throughout the city, we've got a number of streets with money waiting to be used on those streets once the utilities are finally done and complete and there's no other future work.
That's what's wrong with the city. Most of the people, they bitch about the roads and the condition of it, but they don't understand it also involves what's under the road, and I think that should be something that we focus on, letting the public know, because till you said it, I sat here in November and I got wind of that because Councilor Chevy there, however you pronounce his name, was talking about Main Street here, doing the project here, and that never came into the mind. It was the sewage and the plumbing. So, that's probably why a lot of people don't understand. They think, okay, throw a layer of tar on it, we're all set.
I agree, and with the utilities, what you see above ground is in really bad condition, and what you see below ground, unfortunately, is in even worse condition, because a lot of those utilities are, especially water mains, 100 years old. You don't see them, so you don't think about them. But so on the gas side, Unitil is under a consent decree from the state to replace essentially their whole system. So they've got old metal pipes in the ground that are leaking, and that's a huge explosion risk and all that stuff. So they're basically digging up the whole city with their system. The water department has miles and miles and miles, hundreds of miles of water main, over 80 miles of which are, around 100 years old, cast iron, need to be replaced. So they're under huge pressure to replace a massive portion of their system. And then on the sewer side, there's a significant portion of the city's sewer system that's combined. So it has stormwater, like the catch basins you see on the road, those grates, feeding into this sanitary sewer system, which then flows down to the treatment plant and gets treated. So the wastewater division is under a consent decree from the Department of Justice and EPA to separate out that stormwater from its sanitary system. And that's a big part of what's driving all the construction work that you see through the wastewater division right now. So they're basically separating out all of their combined sewers throughout the entire city. So that's another massive chunk of the city. So you've got these 3 different utilities that are in various stages of replacing their whole systems, and their systems span the entire city. So anytime you see a road that has been paved recently, it means we've already gone through and finished the utility work on all 3 fronts.
That's what I'm saying, most people don't understand that. And I think somehow, it's too bad that we don't have the Pittsburgh Sentinel anymore that pays attention to the city of Pittsburgh. Because that word isn't out there, because all I hear about people saying, what the hell's the matter with the city? They can't...
Talk to Jake.
Yeah, who?
Jake, city editor.
Oh, okay, fine.
He's new.
Well, then, he may be the man we need to talk to,
Yeah.
because all I ever hear is, why can't they just lay some tar down, fix the damn thing once and for all, because nobody understands the depth of what it's costing. It's not only $1 for the top, it's $2 for underneath, so.
I will say, I have been very encouraged that in the last month or so, we've finally got a Sentinel reporter covering council meetings again for the first time in about 4 or 5 years. So I think someone has gotten the message that they need to pay a bit of attention again.
Jake Vitale is working to he's actually trying to relocate himself to here so he can be part of it. We just had a coffee meet with him across the street here at the
Pittsburgh Council.
At the Main Street Studios.
Main Street Studios.
But he was also at our ward meeting last month, Jake was, and he heard that message, and he took it to heart. He really took it to heart.
I mean, I don't think the Sentinel anymore simply because it doesn't carry Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things
Well,
that the state
that's what his aim is to carry Fitchburg now, so he's hired a reporter, another reporter.
all by itself, because that's all they don't know what the hell they're doing. Why are they paving this road or that road? They should be doing Kimball Street, should be doing Electric Avenue. You know,
I
this
guess
is why they
Kimball
don't
Street's underneath,
understand
it's not
this
finished
more
yet.
So Kimball Street is a great example of combined sewer separation work that's still outstanding. Right now, that's scheduled for 2028. So I don't think Kimball Street has enough legs left in it to get from here to 2028 without some sort of intervention. So that's actually on our short list of things to pave this year, just because it's in such bad condition. It's not going to be a full depth pave. It's going to be, what can we do that's as cheap as possible to get a smooth surface from now to 2028. So it's probably going to be a very light mill and then an overlay. But that's what we're facing. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation where, you don't pave something because of the utility need, but then, the road's terrible and, it causes issues with traffic and.
They don't take care of the underneath of it, it breaks up faster.
That too, especially with drainage.
Not too long ago, on Chronicle, they had this similar meeting, and they explained it as well as you did. But they have these little caps in Boston, and they're all different color. So when utilities finish, they have to put that cap down to let everyone know that they've done.
Oh, that's a good
And
idea.
then they have another little, whatever color cap for gas. And then they have another one for plumbing. When those combination of caps are down, then they pave the street. But they did that on Chronicle.
That's clever.
We had fun up in West Fitchburg where this DOT did 2A, starting at Wade's Corner and go all the way up to the center of Westminster.
Yeah.
And just after they did it, the water main going up from Wade's Corner let go.
So it was actually a sewer main that collapsed.
Sewer main that collapsed
And
there.
So the deputy commissioner of wastewater at the time, his name was Jeff Morawski, he was furious with DOT because they didn't tell us they were coming in to do that. Had they come in and asked us for permission, well, they don't really need permission, it's their road, but if they had coordinated with us, we would have told them that that main is in seriously poor condition and any heavy machinery there is going to shake it to pieces, which is exactly what happened.
And also they ended with the gas main in front of Monty Tech.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, so one of the things that I've heard through some folks at Mass DOT is that they're trying to target repaving of state-numbered routes that run through cities and towns. So I'm hoping to hear some good news on that in the near future. But that would be money coming down through the state to address those state-numbered routes. So that would be 2A, Westminster Street, you've got Ashburnham Street, you've got Princeton Road. So I'm hoping they actually follow through. Yeah, exactly. 31 Ashby State. So there's a significant portion of state-numbered routes that run right through the center of our town, or city rather. I'm really hoping that DOT follows through with some of the conversations I had with them a couple of months ago to get that type of work done. The question there becomes, where does the work end? You've got pavement, but you've also got sidewalks along most of those roads that are in really tough shape. So, can DOT fund paving and sidewalk work, or is it just going to be limited to paving, So I think they're trying to work through all those issues right now and figure out what they have money for and what can of worms they're really opening by saying, yeah, we'll pave all your state-numbered routes.
John Fitch Highway. I know they've been working on that.
So that project, we funded the 25% design of that project between Summer Street and Lunenburg Street with a grant through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs under their Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Program. So after we completed that 25% design, we did so in such a way that met Mass DOT's criteria for getting a project on the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP is what they call it for short. So we finished that 25% design. We submitted it to DOT. They accepted it onto the TIP, which means essentially they'll pay for the construction funding if we can bring the project from 25% design through 100% design. So the mayor's ARPA committee gave us money to do just that, to bring it from 25% through 100% design. So right now it's on the Transportation Improvement Program. It's on the TIP. And right now, once we finish that design, they'll figure out what year they can slot that project in based on available funding. So it's probably going to be a 5-year time frame, but that's just in time for that pavement on John Fitch Highway through that corridor. That's basically exactly what it has left for lifespan. So my goal as commissioner is to get more projects within the city of Fitchburg on that transportation improvement program so that we're taking more advantage of state DOT funds instead of general fund dollars or Chapter 90 funds or whatever else we use to fund paving here. And that's something that I think Leominster does a good job with, and I'm trying to kind of emulate that. We haven't done it as well here in Fitchburg over the years for whatever reason, but that's the direction I'm trying to head with things. That's true.
I have just a small complaint about roads. Major intersections, the lanes and the arrows and stuff are all basically gone. So you don't know where you're supposed to put yourself to take that turn or whatever. It'd be nice if they could do that as soon as possible come spring.
So we bid out a contract late last summer to repaint the entire city. So we have a contractor on standby for that as soon as the weather's nice. We're going to use that funding and get the whole city repainted.
Sometimes you find yourself in the wrong lane and whoops.
Yeah. So it was towards the end of the good season last year. So we could have painted it all then, but then you have snow plows that run over it, salt, sand, it kind of wears the paint away. So we figured we'd hold off for a couple more months and get it done first thing in the spring.
Well, thank you, Nick. We're gonna let City Council President Zarella. So hold that question, Gary, and we'll let you ask it at the end. What's that?
You're gonna get it.
Okay.
Get it answered.
Okay.
Fair enough.
You might get an answer. Yeah.
So thank you. I do not have anywhere near as slick a presentation. I'm basically just speaking off the cuff here, but first I want to thank you all for being here. I've been out this past week knocking doors, collecting signatures, and you'd be surprised, or maybe if you're cynical, you wouldn't, at just how many people say, no, I don't vote, or I'm not interested in politics, or whatever. Or Well, that I'm okay with. That I'm fine with. But, it's I don't do politics, or I don't vote, or, if you're just a city councilor, then whatever, I'll just wait until the state people are up for election. I can't say this enough. This, right here in this room, this is where the stuff happens that actually affects your lives. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it makes no impact on anyone's life who's sitting in the White House or who's on Beacon Hill. Of course it makes a difference. But which party is in power nationally, or who is sitting at the State House, that doesn't affect how your roads get paved, or what your how your kids' schools are, or what your, taxes and utilities, and those all happen here. Doesn't mean we can control it all. There's an awful lot we can't control. But as far as politics can control that stuff, it happens here. So I wish that this whole room were full tonight.
The more you hear, the more you can do.
Exactly. I tell every year or every other year when I go out and talk to people, that's what I tell them. I tell them, look, I consider it my job to be as informed as I can about the things that I'm going to vote on, but there is no way, even if this were my full-time job, there just aren't enough hours in the day for me to know everything that would be helpful for me to make the best decisions for this city. So if someone has an idea, call me, tell me. There's no way I'm going to have all the ideas myself, or even all 11 of us. If someone has a concern, call me, tell me. I may have already heard it from a bunch of other people, but maybe it's the first I'm hearing of it. Because as involved as I try to be, I can't be involved in every sector of the city. I can inquire about the schools, but I can't know everything that's going on at every school. I can ask about, the public utilities and trash collection and whatnot, all that stuff. But I can't monitor all however many miles of this city myself. So tell me what's on your mind, what matters to you, what you want me to know, what you want me to think about. And I think that goes for all of us. I don't want to speak for Councillor Schultz or the other 9 councillors, but I've known them all a while now, and I think that applies to all of them. I think all of us need to hear from you guys, because it's our job to be informed, to know some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that's happening that isn't necessarily all public information. But the flip side of that is we often only get the information that is known to the city already, and whatever we happen to come across in our day-to-day lives. So thank you all for taking the time to be here, for being interested enough in your community to show up. And I really appreciate that. Now, I think because it's kind of the theme of the evening, I probably will talk a little bit about roads as well. But because of who I'm following here, I invite Commissioner Erickson to jump in at any time and correct me if I'm saying anything inaccurate, because I've been looking into the situation for 6 years or so now, but it's not my day job. So there are things that I don't know and things that I will misquote or miscite. But this is another thing. Every third door I knock on, I ask people, what are you thinking about? What are your thoughts on the city? And it's the roads. And that hasn't come up this year, surprisingly enough. I was admittedly getting a little tired of explaining that one. I'll explain it 1,000 more times if people want me to, but, you know, I'm glad that it seems to be settling down. But it's roads and Unitil. Those are the two that I get almost everywhere. And I try to tell people not only all the stuff that Commissioner Erickson said about what we are trying to do with the roads, but I keep coming back to, number one, when Commissioner Laxo left office, and I think it was 2018, he sent, about 2 or 3 months before he left, he sent the City Council a report that said a lot of stuff about road paving and everything, but one thing that has always stuck in my head was to pave 1 mile of 2-lane road in 2018. It cost approximately $550,000. It's my understanding that since then that number has almost doubled, if not doubled. So $1 million for 1 mile. So when budget season comes around, I always get some calls from certain constituents, some every year, and honestly, I love it. I wish more people would, but they ask me to come to their house and go through the budget with them, you know, to tell them what we're spending and why. And every now and then, as I'm going through, someone will point to a certain line item and say, well, this doesn't seem all that important. Why don't we put that towards the roads instead? And honestly, some of those line items aren't of critical importance. They're things that we could cut if we absolutely had to. Sure, like that. But that's a great example. $10,000 probably wouldn't even pave as much road as from this end of the table to the other. So we'd be cutting something that maybe isn't critical, but makes the city look better for visitors and whatnot, in order to do practically nothing for the roads. I'm sure you guys could use an extra $10,000 here and there, but it wouldn't get the roads paved.
It would be more useful for pothole patching than paving.
Right.
So just for comparison, we paved a section of Beach Street right around the time that you're talking about, 2019, 2020. So it was from Kimball Street to Pratt, roughly 3,000 feet, but it included sidewalk, and sidewalks are very expensive. So that 3,000 feet of paving and sidewalks cost us almost $1 million. And that's not even a mile. I mean, it's closer to a half mile than it is to a mile. So.
And that was before all the COVID-related price escalations and everything,
correct.
Right? Yep. So we need to keep these things in perspective. The other thing is we have challenges for our roads that practically no other place in the state has, in terms of our hills, our water table, our weather. I mean, I assume most of you have lived in Fitchburg for a while. You know, when a storm comes through, whether it's a rainstorm, a snowstorm, whatever, the surrounding areas get like 2 inches, we get 4, because the storms come over the hills and park themselves right over Fitchburg. And that takes a toll. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's, you know, a combination of the freezing and melting, the runoff, the pooling, all of that degrades our roads. And so the last I heard, DOT said that a newly paved road gets, 15 to 20 years? Do we even get half of that out of ours?
Typically, no.
Right. And it's not because we're paving them poorly. It's because our roads are getting hammered in a way that Leominster's roads don't, and Lunenburg's roads don't, and Westminster's roads don't. And that's just a reality. We can't terraform Fitchburg to make it easier to keep our roads paved. So we need to be realistic about what the city can and what the city can't do, like you were saying. And I've tried to make people more aware of these issues, and I think it's helping. I think more people know now. But it bothers me when we have, whether it's Commissioner Erickson or any of his employees, in front of the city council, and they're getting hammered, whether by public comment or by councilors or whoever, for things that we're being unreasonable about, that we're expecting them to do more than they can possibly do. So we've been trying to get creative. I know I've talked with Commissioner Erickson, and he's told me about some of the creative technical methods that they've been using to try and make our roads last longer. And then last year, I was brainstorming with Councillor Boschman, and some of you may remember the proposal that we put forward. Went over like a lead balloon, but I get that. Honestly, I'm not surprised either, and I certainly am not upset. The idea was to throw out new ideas. You know, whether they're accepted or rejected, succeed or fail, we need to start thinking outside the box. The idea was to get a new funding stream in that would be what the excise tax was always supposed to be, isolated to just roads. By law, that was the plan, was to isolate it so that we were legally unable to divert it to anything else. Now, in hindsight, was that the best way to do it, the right way to do it? The specific plan that we had to charge a use fee on automobiles? Maybe not, probably not. But it was something. Something more than sitting here and telling you we can't do it. And so that comes back to what I was saying at first. We need ideas. Good ideas, bad ideas, crazy ideas. We need ideas because some of these problems are ones that we've been dealing with as a city for decades, sometimes longer. And the standard methods haven't been working. I'm just going to give a quick rundown of what the other ways that we could get more money for our roads are.
In other words, we can't just wait for the state to say, well, we're going to give Fitchburg more than that 1.2 million funding for roads.
Right.
We just can't wait. I mean,
Why did you pass question 1?
well, hopefully some of that money, as you say, Jack, was going to come to Fitchburg. But previous to question 1, we always said, well, the state should give us more money. We need more money. Well, yeah, but it's not happening. So what do we do in the meantime?
Exactly. Oh, go ahead.
The idea for the $200 on a car, and I'll be honest with you, it was the first night I heard it was here at the council meeting. I blew my stack. And I didn't get out of control here, but I took it outside the building and then went home, and my wife listened to me. But then Bernie will tell you, he had another meeting, and believe this or not, the night we had the meeting, I got into it with, how do you pronounce his last name? Boschman. Thank you. Councilor Boschman, to the point he actually came to my house the next day, knocked on my door. I didn't know how the hell to handle it, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, I just gave this guy a ration, and he's here being a nice guy. And then we talked. And then at the next meeting, when I came back here, and I had talked to some of my neighbors, and they all like to know what's going on, but they won't come here. In fact, this is the first time I've seen Gary here. So, but anyways, what I'm getting at is, and I explained this to Paul, was that we didn't understand. There was no in-depthness to it. It was as simple as that, well, we want to, Councilor Zarella and I want to put a $200 tax, we're proposing it, okay? And I walked out of here mad. But then after talking to Paul, I understood how it was going to go. And like I said, there's no explanation about cars off the road. There was no explanation about people that live outside the city but working here with a car that's registered in Rhode Island or Pennsylvania or something. And those were the things that people didn't understand. There was some body to that. The idea of it, yeah, it's a good idea, but I just think not enough was brought out to the public, put out there, that explained it, like the roads, and we were just saying. I didn't understand the fact that, yeah, okay, we're gonna pave a road, boom, throw some tar. The under part of it, the piping, the what, I never understood that. So now I understand that, and I feel a hell of a lot better knowing that that's why the roads aren't getting their side of the money. But I think the understanding of what you have has to be made clearer before we have it. These ideas are great, but they have to have some body to it before you present it. This idea that maybe we're going to get some representation in the Sentinel, that'll go along, because then maybe people will start buying it like me. And, but that's all.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And like I said at the council meeting when it actually got turned down, I think that's absolutely right. I think that we needed to do both more sort of craft work on it and more outreach ahead of time. And I'll take the blame for that, because I had told Councillor Boschman that I would do some of that work, and then some family things came up. We had some deaths in the family and so forth, and medical issues, and I dropped the ball on it. So I'll take all the blame for that. But you're right. Yeah.
I think if you can get some guts to it and explain, what the infrastructure of that whole idea is, I think that would be more, people would.
We're thinking
It
about
will never pass.
Might not.
The ballot will never pass.
it. Might not, but
You want your
it's worth a try. But no, we're thinking of it. If we do, it won't be until next year, because it doesn't make sense to put it on a municipal ballot when we know that unfortunately turnout will be much lower. I wish that turnout were like above 50% every year, but it's not going to be. So right, exactly. So we want to, if we are going to bring it up again, we want to make sure that it's in a state election year when we'll have at least somewhat higher turnout. And actually, it'll be a presidential election year, so that should crank it up a little higher too. But yeah, we're definitely thinking about retooling it and bringing it back in a better fleshed out version. And maybe in the process, someone will have an idea for how to do something similar that's more palatable to people. Because I know it's going to be a hard sell, obviously. And everyone tells me that's what we should have been just doing that with the excise tax. I agree, but those decisions were made before I was even, out of grade school. And now that the excise tax money is all in the general fund, it's virtually impossible to pull it out again, because there's just we can't make those cuts. And like I said, I would invite any of you, I can't do it for literally every citizen in Fitchburg, but I would invite any of you when budget time comes around, if you want to go through the budget, and I wouldn't blame you if you think there must be some cuts we can make that we're not making. I would be absolutely thrilled to meet with you at your house, at some public place, wherever, at my office, and go through the budget. We can go through one line at a time if you want. And if you think there's something we can cut that would be helpful, I'm open to it. If you find something I haven't found, great.
Gary will give you one. Gary will give you
Go ahead.
I don't listening to lack of money. You're saying this thing, that thing. She has $10,000 for the decorations. What is the city giving to the Johnny Appleseed Visitor Center in Lancaster?
I don't remember the exact line item, but if...
$50,000.
Yeah, $50,000.
That's what it is this year?
Yep. Yeah. So, again, that's...
$1,000 there, $10,000 there. I'd love to see the exact line budget of everything in the city, because that's a waste of money, giving it to them. Because I've been down there, and I've challenged you to come down there with me, and I've been down there. I found 2 brochures down there, one for Fitchburg State University and one for the Art Museum is down there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, and the hotel up on the hill.
Great Wolf. Yep.
Right. And that's it. And I didn't turn over every product to see if it was made in Fitchburg. But the only other thing mentioned in Fitchburg is the magazine. Why is Fitchburg giving any money to Lancaster, to down there? Because if someone's coming in saying, I want to go to a restaurant, okay? Well, you get off at the very next exit. You've got the, right behind, almost behind the thing, there's Olive Garden, there's Dick's Sporting Goods, there's Target.
Sure.
There's everything just
Orchard
behind
Hill,
you
yep.
need. And if you take the next exit, as if you're going 190, you go in the back way of Mullet Whitney Field.
Searstown, yep.
Yeah, so now you've got a couple of farms down there where you can get gas and every other little thing.
Oh, I know what you
And
mean.
then you go in the back way, you can get anything. There's even a motel there,
Yeah.
okay? And if you kept on Route 2, go to the next exit. No, you can go up 13 or left again to another side entrance to another entrance to the old Sears Town. Or if you keep going to Route 12, you go right and left. You got Water Tower Plaza one way, and you take a right. You got Bergman Way, and across the street there's 2 hotels there.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
There's restaurants there. How is that promoting Fitchburg? Okay?
Well, so-
Everything you need, everything a tourist would need or somebody just passing through, would kind of have to come near Fitchburg. You're still miles from Fitchburg.
Sure.
Okay?
So Go ahead.
There was in the Fitchburg Sentinel a long time ago. I don't remember how many years, a few years. That I think it was Kathleen Turner. I don't want to say her name, but it might be her. It was a famous lady in the movies. Everybody would hear her if her name would know her. Her son went to Cushing and Cab in Ashburnham.
Mm-hmm.
She stayed at I think now it's a different name, but it used to be the Super 8 Hotel or something.
I know the one you mean, yep.
Behind Friendlies, like that. She stayed there, and then she went on home to Connecticut like that. But I see no reason for giving them $50,000 at any time. Let the businesses that belong to the Neshoba Valley Chamber of Commerce and the North Worcester County Chamber of Commerce, if they want to put their products in or their brochures in, let them pay for it. Okay, let them run the place.
All right.
Okay,
So-
I think you made your point, Gary.
Well, no. My point would be made when you don't give them any more money.
So give me a call sometime because I would be. Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you my number. I ran out of cards knocking doors today, but I'll give you my number. And it's going to be another few months before this coming year's budget starts to be processed, but I can go through last year's budget with you and we can try and find anything you think, that and anything else, and we can see what it would do if we shift the money around to different spots. And because like I said,
Library would like $50,000 more dollars.
Sure.
The school system would like $50,000 more dollars.
The school budget is mostly separate from the general fund, but otherwise, yeah, we can go through it. Well, yes, we can go through it.
I know their budget may be different, but where the money comes from, it's still us taxpayers.
Oh yeah, no, I know it. No, we can go through it because I always believe when I take a vote that at the time it's the best vote I can be making, but I don't think I'm infallible, you know? You may point out something that I haven't considered before, and great. So yeah, let's go through that sometime.
Jacqueline had a question. Jacqueline had a question.
So I actually got a copy of last year's budget from the Finance Committee Chair. I went through it. I found enough money to take care of our roads, and was all, oh, we can't cut this, we can't cut that. Turns out, of the $600,000 Community Development Department budget, only $100,000 will be obligated by law to do.
Sure.
We're spending $200,000 a year above the state minimum in our schools, and if we switch to on-call pay for our firefighters instead of benefited positions, which also include the unfunded pension and post-employee retirement benefits, you'd get there just with those three changes.
So I think we need to draw a distinction between can't cut as in are legally prohibited from cutting, and can't cut as in it's an essential service that we really shouldn't be cutting.
A bunch of area communities that border us, they do on-call pay for firefighters.
Oh, sure. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the right choice, though. And that, I appreciate the idea, but that particular cut is not one that I would be open to entertaining personally. I don't care about the politics. I'll lose votes for a vote that I care about. It's that I don't believe that cutting our fire department's budget or our firefighters' benefits is the right thing to do. I think that for the job that they do, they deserve every penny they get. And they're paid to be on call. They're paid to be on call before they run into burning buildings. I think that's, if some of their shift is spent asleep so that they can work while the rest of us sleep, and while the rest of us know that we won't be, dying in our beds of smoke inhalation or anything, then I think that's a worthwhile payment. There may be things we can cut. That I don't think is one of them. We can talk about that another time if you want, but as of right now, that particular thing is not a thing that I would entertain cutting. It's just too important, and the job they do merits every bit that we give them. I believe that very firmly, and when it comes to politics, I'm always willing to compromise and to change my mind. When it comes to matters of principle, that's where politics shouldn't come into it. It's not a matter of what's going to get me the votes, what's going to make the city happy. If it's the right thing to do, we need to do it, even if it's not the most beneficial thing to do. Do what's right first, and then see how much money we have left to shift around.
Okay. Well, we're already after 8 o'clock. Is there any other questions anybody has?
I put out all the time is everybody to use C-Click Fix.
Mm-hmm.
Because that gets the information to you quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I have a question about C-Click Fix. I don't remember my password. Is there an area where I could read?
So when you go to the main logon screen, there should be a little button at the bottom that says "Forgot Password," and it should send you a reset link if you click that. And I don't know if it prompts you to enter your email address or if it just remembers the one that you have stored, but it'll probably have you enter the email address, then you press submit, and then it'll email you a reset link.
If not, I'm bringing the pictures that I have.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, feel free to stop by Broad Street. I'm on the second floor, kind of in the middle of the building, so.
Glad you're here.
Thanks.
Thank you for the explanation of all the bridges and.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes.
We appreciate it, Commissioner Erickson, and we appreciate Council President Zarella coming.
Oh, thank you.
So before we go, I just want to thank all of you for coming. Oh, I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So we're almost out of time, and I don't want to hold you here any longer, but I just want to say that our next meeting next Ward 1 community meeting is going to be on March 13th at 6:30 here in the Legislative Building, and City Solicitor Vinnie Pusatari and also City Manager of Information Technology Trevor Bonilla are going to be here that evening. And Trevor, he had to cancel due to illness the last time he was going to be at the January meeting. So he's going to make a comeback and be here in March. So thank you all for coming, and good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
since I kind of feel like Bernie might be disappointed if I don't use this at least once tonight, we are adjourned.